Welcome to another episode of Jews and the World. I'm Phyllis Zimbler Miller, and today I'm very excited because this is a special program in honor of the United States Veterans Day, which is on November 11th, and in this case, November 11th, 2024. So I have with me two rabbis who have served in the U.S. military as chaplains, although their origin stories are different. So I'm going to let Arnie Resnikoff and Larry Baser tell their origin stories. And I think we'll let Arnie start because his is a little different than Larry's. Take it away, Arnie.
Mine actually begins with my father, who was born in Russia, came to America when he was 3, so he was super patriotic because America gave the family freedoms that they did not have in Russia. So my father didn't have a career in the military, but he quit his job the day after Pearl Harbor and he served in World War II. I was the oldest of 3 boys, and so he just communicated to me that he expected at least me to continue to pay our dues and go in the military for at least one assignment. So in high school, I actually joined the Navy Reserves, switched to ROTC in college. That's the program, Reserve Officers Training Corps, that allows you to get training as an officer in college and then go on active duty when you graduate.
As an officer.
Yeah, that's right, either active duty or reserves as an officer. So I went to Dartmouth College in a Navy ROTC, then straight to the rivers of Vietnam. And it actually was thanks to a Christian chaplain in Vietnam. No one in the rivers had enough people on a ship or a boat to merit their own chaplain. So there was a circuit riding chaplain for the Mekong Delta, an Episcopal priest, Les Westling. He deputized me, made me what the military calls a Jewish lay leader. So I was his point of contact to let him know if a Jewish holiday was coming, what supplies we may need. And he convinced me to consider being a rabbi. So still in Vietnam, I started corresponding with Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, the rabbinical school that I eventually went to. But I still had a few years of obligated service left because of the ROTC. So after Vietnam, I switched to naval intelligence. And then from Rota, Spain, where I was riding submarines for naval intelligence, when I finally got out, I went to rabbinical school, then back in the Navy for what I thought would be one assignment as a chaplain, but I stayed another 25 years. I will say, because I think you have connections to the intelligence arena, that my friends like to say that I traded in top secret as a naval intelligence officer for top sacred as a chaplain.
Oh, I like that. I like it a lot. Yes,
So
as I
that's
told
my
Arnie, I did have a
short
top
story.
secret clearance. Eventually, when my husband, who already had a clearance, we were stationed in Munich, and he had been ROTC at Michigan State, which is where we had met. So now, Larry, you get to tell your origin story.
Well, thank you. And I'm excited to be with both of you. So in a neat connection. So yes, when I was a kid, I played with GI Joes and I played soldier and everything, um, and had this idea. But I actually, when I went to college, Connecticut College, I have a BA in zoology, and I was thinking toward medicine and the sciences. Though my home rabbi of blessed memory, Stanley Kessler, planted a seed in me about being a rabbi. And when I realized what I had to struggle after college, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I everything sort of came together, and I realized I cared more about the nefesh than the goof. I cared more about the soul of a person than the actual physical body in the medical sense. And so that led me to also Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, did a preparatory program. And then in my first year, I learned about this chaplain candidate program. And now the interesting connection. I heard there was this really great JTS graduate who was a senior chaplain in the United States Navy by the name of Chaplain Captain Arnie Resnikoff. And I reached out to him when I was a seminary and said, find out I wanted to be a Navy chaplain. I thought the uniforms were cool, aircraft carrier, and this influence of Arnie Resnikoff. And so I applied. But the funny part is I had asthma as a child the Navy wouldn't take me. Called up Arnie. Arnie said, "Why don't you go Army? And then you could transfer later." And so, Phyllis, over 35 years of commissioned service, I never left the Army. So I just retired as an Army for my career, mostly as I did the chaplain candidate program when you're still at a seminary. And then for most of my career, I was a National Guardsman. So I was reserve component, so pulpit rabbi, and I had the opportunity in my last 6 years, since 2018, to actually go active duty with the National Guard Bureau of the United States Army and joint service, and retired this past spring from military service. And I was very proud. I'm going to put this out for Arnie. At my retirement ceremony, my closing benediction was Arnie. I asked Arnie to give
That's
it.
really lovely. And now you have a new position that we want to talk
And now I
about.
have a new position where I'm the director of the JWB, Jewish Welfare Board's Jewish Chaplains Council. So I oversee all mainline conservative, Orthodox, Reform, Reconstructionist, pluralistic rabbis and some cantors and Jewish programming in the military for the Department of Defense. And the JWB is a signature program, part of the JCC Association of North America, where I'm also the vice president. So I really get to live in these two great worlds.
I just
And if I
realized,
can give a plug to Larry or his organization,
go ahead.
today we use the initials JWB, but it was originally the National Jewish Welfare Board. I think one of the reasons they changed was the meaning of welfare changed over the years. But it's important to note that it was established in World War I because already Jews were serving in World War I, and it has continued to support Jews since then up until today, through today.
That's what I wanted to say. I just decided now to tell a quick origin story of my own. So when my husband and I got to Munich, there was an Orthodox chaplain who influenced us greatly. And eventually we started keeping kosher, but that's another story. But the second year we were there, my husband became the lay leader. And the JWB sent us supplies like kosher canned soup, etc. And I think to this day, I still have the challah cover that JWB gave us. So I was going to put a plug for that too.
Wonderful.
So it's been an honor to be able to do this.
So now let's talk about the fallacy that many Americans, including American Jews, do not realize that Jewish men and women currently serve in the United States military forces. And also we want to encourage rabbis in rabbinic school and even later in their career to consider serving in the military. So, Arnie, why don't you take Jews in the military and Larry can take Jewish chaplains? How's that?
There are Jews in the military at every single level. A lot of civilians may not realize that the highest admiral in the Navy was once Jewish, and the highest general in the Air Force was once Jewish. And the Marine Corps, the deputy, not the commandant yet, has not been Jewish, but the deputy. So at every single level. And, it's an honor. Now, in the Navy, Navy chaplains are the only officers in the military, as far as I know, who actually can wear 3 different uniforms, because we serve the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. Today, the Air Force chaplains serve Space Force. So every service is covered by chaplains. Larry can say more about that. But in every branch, it's very important. I'll also say one thing. I know you know Rabbi Erich Shuren in Los Angeles. I spoke once at his father's congregation when he was young, and to this day, he still remembers that I said that even if there were no Jew in the military, we still should have Jewish chaplains, because when leaders sit at the table and discuss issues of right and wrong and war and peace, I want a Jewish voice at that table. So in addition to all the things that chaplains do for the military personnel, we are part of the discussion, right and wrong and war and peace. And I think every American should want a rabbi there.
Okay, Larry, now you tell us how rabbis get there.
So it's a great statement. So this is, I want to actually quickly say, one of the questions I get all the time, I'm sure, Arnie, you had this. How many Jews are in the military? How many rabbi? I mean, these are the starting off questions. So my first answer is there's not a lot, but more than you think.
Hmm.
And I mean, if you know, in press, I would say we're probably right now currently about 10,000 Jews in the United States military. And this is who identifies as being Jewish on some form or another. So, and then you're talking about their families, because it's not just a service member, it's their families, their partners, so loved ones, their children. I'll even say, you know, the parents who are proud of them sitting in a shul somewhere. So there's a lot more. As far as the rabbis we have currently on active duty, 18 rabbis that the JWB, Jewish Chaplains Council, endorses for chaplaincy, active duty, Army, Navy, Air Force, the big three, and then servicing the others. We have probably over 20 that are reserve component, Army Reserve, Army National Guard, Air Reserve and Guard, Navy. Navy is only in the reserve components, servicing the Marines and Coast Guard. So again, if you think about it, then it goes to all the lay leaders, like your husband did, that help take care of people. So how does one become a chaplain? Well, so one is to start off as sort of a look and see through the chaplain candidate program. All the services, I'm going to now use the big chaplaincies. Army, Navy, Air Force have a seminarian program, not just for rabbis, but all major faith groups. So the Catholics have it, the Protestants have it, etc. That you start off in seminary.
Oh, wait, you mean while you're training to be a clergy?
Oh, right. So exactly. So you apply. So you say, hey, I'm interested in this. You have to be in a real accredited base type program. That's number one, seminary. And you also have to meet the military requirements like anyone else. So there's a double screening, there's medical stuff. But once you're in, you are commissioned, meaning that the United States government gives you sort of this, it's not even a certification. You have this obligation to serve in this role as an officer with officer privileges. So I had the same rank when I started off as a second lieutenant as every other second lieutenant, which meant someone who is a sergeant with 25 years in still had to salute me outside. I mean, that was, and I have funny stories of like that. But the great part, I will actually say, my commissioning was in Jerusalem because I was studying at the time in Israel at the U.S. consulate. That's where I took my oath of office, and very appropriate. My first salute ever was from a Marine there. So so you do seminary, and then hopefully once you finish seminary, that you will head off, you will go active duty. That's really what the military wants and what we would love to happen. But there's also a reserve component. You really want to be a pulpit rabbi, or you want to go and work in a Hillel. You could also still do military chaplaincy, sort of is like up in the part-time world, the reserve components. I would say which branch you go into, forget about any rivalries of Army beat Navy or Navy beat Air Force or anything. It's really about where's your love. I would say, Arnie, if I could put words in your mouth, you could only think of being a Navy chaplain. I don't know if you thought about, well, maybe if I come back, I'll think I'll go Air Force. Probably not. It's where your love is. Maybe you're fit. And I will say this really in the most positive level. So many of the chaplains who apply or chaplain candidates, they choose the service that they had a loved one that was really a part of it. And that was this incredible influence. So all those opportunities are open. And then if you're already ordained and you're now a rabbi, and I'm going to share one or two quick stories and turn it back. You could say, you know, I like the pulpit work, or I'm interested in the Hillel work or whatever you're doing, but I really want to serve my nation. And I want to serve my nation in a way that's different than any other way as a rabbi. And so we'll have people that will come after many years, and as long as, again, they're physically fit, they can pass the requirements of the military, and they're ordained from like one of the major rabbinic organization. You could go active duty, And there's usually an age limit up to, let's say, 42. There are waivers, though, if you're beyond.
Hmm.
And so you have to apply for the waiver to be able to get in. But it's not like if you're past 42, there's no answer. It's not a possible. There is. And I'll share the story of one of our colleagues who's on Long Island, who's actually born in another country, lived in this for many, many years, longtime pulpit rabbi, successful pulpit rabbi, who really wanted to serve our nation. He believed so strongly in it and wanted to show his children what it means to do service. Applied to be in the New York Army National Guard, and he's in his 50s, early 50s, and he was granted the waiver. Understands that he might not get 20 years, and he finished this past summer chaplain school. He actually won the communication award from the United States Army Chaplain School amongst all the Christian peers and everyone. And he said he was so proud to serve in uniform. And that's really, I would say, it's a door that can be opened. We really do need active duty rabbis. We need rabbis who want to step up and serve the Jews who serve, which is the model of the JWB, serving Jews who serve.
Serving
And
Jews who serve. I want to dive a little deeper because I think this is really interesting. One of the things that, and I'm talking personally, we found important was being able to tell people what Jews are. Because yes, there are, I mean, I grew up in Elgin, Illinois, where there were very few Jews. So but my husband's from Philadelphia. I was already prepared to have to explain that we didn't celebrate Christmas, etc. But one of the things that that Jewish chaplains can do, and they do administer to non-Jews too. I think we could talk about that. And even Arnie raised that earlier. So in an area that you might be assigned where there's not enough chaplains of various religions, a Jewish chaplain will open up his or her doors for counseling, etc. I mean, I don't want to say what Larry knows, but I just want to get this across. But it's a chance for people to actually learn about Jews and Judaism and be able to come to a Jewish chaplain and say, could you explain this to me? It's an amazing opportunity. Larry, did I take the words out of your mouth now?
No, absolutely. But I'm going to let Arnie turn it over. We both, I would imagine, have stories of exactly that, and really the influence at senior level.
Yeah, and I would say a few quick things. There were books written after the First World War that made the claim that one reason Americans think that there are three major religions in America, Judaism, at that point it was Judaism, Protestantism, Catholicism, was because those were the three kinds of chaplains that they experienced in the military in World War II. And so
Wait, World War I or World War II?
Actually, the claims were made in the 50s after World War II, because so many people went in World War II, and then the veterans came out and helped settle communities throughout America. And it was their memories that there were three kinds of chaplains that, despite the fact that Jews are only a little over 2% of the country, they put it on the same level as the varieties of Catholicism and Protestantism, because they knew those were the three kinds. Now, today, we also have chaplains that are Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, but when I came in, there were just Christian chaplains and Jewish chaplains. And I think it's very, very important to remember that. The other thing, getting back to what you were saying about serving the needs of all personnel, it's not just that we do that, if we have time. It's our core responsibility, besides advising the command on matters of ethics and morals and religion. We teach in the chaplain schools, and I'm sure it's the same Army as Navy, that there are three responsibilities for chaplains. We minister to our own, which means I'll always be the rabbi for Jews. We facilitate ministry to those of other faiths. So I'll never lead a Catholic service or a Muslim service, but I'll be the one to make sure that personnel of those faiths can attend the services, that they have the Bibles, they have the prayer rugs, they have the rotaries. And then finally, we care for all, which means people without a faith also come to the chaplains. And one thing I like to share with civilians, because many of them don't know this, that the only officer, the only individual in the military that has 100% privileged communication, confidentiality, is the chaplain, more than the psychiatrist, more than the lawyer. So many, many people who came to me just wanted to have a sounding board, someone to give them advice. I remember people who were gay came to me when they weren't allowed to admit it on the outside. People on drugs came to me to help me, to have advice for me on how to struggle. I remember one time someone came to me and said, "Tomorrow I'm running away." And it was, a cry for help for me to change his mind, I think. But I said to him, if you do run away, the Army calls it going AWOL. The Navy says UA, unauthorized absence. But I said, take my phone number. If you change your mind, call me first. I'll help get you back. But I said, by the way, one of the things I teach when I teach chaplains is know when to preach, know when to teach. So instead of getting on my high horse and preaching to him that he had taken an oath and he, had to stay, I said, I decided to teach. And I said, if you run away, the FBI is not going to sick the dogs on you. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe you'll be married with children. You'll go through a stop sign. They'll go through your records and find you're a deserter and your life will crumble. Why don't we talk about why you want to run away and maybe what we can do about that? So I'm very proud that people of all faiths have come to me. And of course, in terrible situations like the Beirut bombing, we didn't ask the person's religion when we went up to them wounded. We comforted, we held them, we told them, help us on the way, regardless of religion.
Larry, do you want to now? Recently, I was talking to someone about dog tags, and I interviewed someone who was doing something I thought amazing, which is working on changing crosses to stars of World War II veterans in European cemeteries. And as we talked about it at that time, many Jews fighting in Europe in World War II chose not to have the religion on their dog tags. So if God forbid they were captured by the Nazis. Now today, is there still that pushback from having your dog tags? I mean, I still have my husband's dog tags, and I forget if they say Jew or Hebrew. I forget what it is because they changed over the years.
Right. So I think at one point so I actually have heard stories like that it was a J. One person actually survived a selection in the military because it said Hebrew and it wasn't translated. The Nazi didn't know the word and just let him pass because it didn't come out as Jewish and it saved his life. I heard that story about a year ago. It's actually a great question. I have to tell you, I was very proud of I call them dog tags. The official terminology is identification tag.
Oh.
So ID tags. And in the military, you were supposed to wear them everywhere. I was very proud that it said Jewish. So that was on mine. There were thoughts. I've heard stories like at the beginning of Desert Storm that Jews were told, hey, you're going to a Muslim Arab country. Don't. I can't tell you who took them off or who got new dog tags. I would say this. I mean, I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. Jewish was on mine. And I walked around base when I wasn't in uniform, in my physical training uniform with a kippah. And I always did in that part. I will say this. I would say more Jews maybe wouldn't put it on, not because, and this is more of an American phenomenon. They just wouldn't think about putting that on their ID tag. The actual challenge of that is something for we chaplains, because the way we know how many Jews are in our unit or on a ship or whatever is there's a master roster, and it does list you would run a report of how many what their faith groups are. Good chaplain would do that. I have so many Catholics, so many Protestants. So if they don't list that they're Jewish, you might not know, which I'll say a lot of other faith groups, because it's not as important, they don't think that way. Now, I'm sure Arnie has had this experience. you really don't know they're Jewish, they run into a rabbi, and this is why it's so important to have rabbis. Oh, I've never met a rabbi in the military before. Hey, I'm Jewish. Or, you know, I even got from a person who said, oh, my spouse is Jewish. And I believe what's so important why we served is just igniting a Jewish soul who maybe it was not that important. They're proud to serve our nation, you know, flying F-18s off of aircraft carriers to driving a sub or a tank or refueling being the chemical officer for fuel on an Air Force base in Jordan. It's igniting them to feel what it means to be Jewish. And I think more than anything else is what rabbis are able to do and to identify. Actually, I want to share one story that happened last year for Passover. My story was came over to Germany. I was in Grafenwehr, Germany for the
The
first
big
time.
troop area, yeah.
Okay. I went from there. It was 2 days of 2 seders, 4 countries, 8 days, and 1,600 miles driving. And I went to all these bases from Germany through Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. And in one of these bases in Poland, we're going around the room finding out there's only 4 people that showed up. And it was post Passover, so we're just celebrating Passover. One of them was born in Korea, but adopted by Jewish parents, bar mitzvah, the whole works. Another, he and his wife converted to Judaism because they found it was something meaningful. Another was in an intermarriage. And then this one young soldier who said, when I asked where they were from and their story, said, I'm from the backwoods of Kentucky. And he says, Rabbi, the backwoods, there are no Jews there. And he was probably raised Pentecostal or something. And he said, our grandmother was dying. We all gathered, and my mother was her daughter. We all gathered around her bed as we're sharing stories. And she goes, and then she blurts out, I'm Jewish, and so are all of you. And he didn't know what to do with that. And he said, I got to find out what it means to be Jewish. He's stationed in Poland at this remote base. And a rabbi came and he wanted to show up because what does it mean to be Jewish? I think that's what we do to ignite souls, which is very important for that. So
I love it that Larry says that because, I think the number of Jews who actually knock on my door, to make an appointment is minuscule compared to the conversations you have on the street. In chaplaincy, we call it ministry of presence. You're there, and I can't tell you how many times someone Jewish has met me and said, I'm Jewish, but I'm not religious. And I would say to them, why, how do you define that? I said, there are thousands of commandments. I said, maybe you're doing better in honor your father and mother than I am. Maybe you're doing better in love your neighbor than I am. I may be a little better in keeping kosher or keeping Shabbos than you, but who says that's more important? So we get in these conversations that they never would have knocked on the door of a synagogue in the civilian world and asked to discuss the meaning of Judaism with a civilian rabbi. By the way, in terms of dog tags, an uncle that I loved very, very much, one of my mother's brothers, was in the Army Air Corps before, the Air Force became its own branch in World War II. And he would be on combat missions over Germany. And he told me that his dog tag did have an H. Originally it was an H, then it turned to J. But and today you can have anything up to 16 characters, as far as I know. So you can have conservative Jew, reform, humanist. But he said that before the mission, because they were afraid of being shot down and captured by the Nazis, the Jews would take their dog tags off, put it in a box, and then pick out a different dog tag with someone else's name or a fictitious name, and they would keep a manifest to remember what dog tag you were wearing when you were shot down, God forbid.
Right.
But when he returned safely, he would take back his own dog tag.
That's a story that I've never heard. That's very interesting.
Wow.
And I want to tell you what the Orthodox chaplain, who my husband and I were very influenced with in Munich, said once, he said it's a continuum. And you start somewhere and you move along it. And, it depends. So, we started practicing keeping kosher, which was not so easy. And, and you move along and then you see where you fit in. And I will say that, and I'll try not to cry, that being stationed in Munich only 25 years after the end of World War II did change my husband's in my life forever. We've now been married 55 years, but it's what I'm doing this now because it's just, as American Jews whose families escaped from the Tsar, whose family members, did not come from the Holocaust, but were survivors of getting out of Russia. Yeah, we knew what the Holocaust was, but really to have been on the ground line 25 years later changed our lives forever. But also being in the military did, because you're exposed to people that you have no idea you'll never meet and who have. I'll just share this one other story. So when we got to Fort Knox, my husband was an armor officer basic. He had to do a combat arms, but Larry and I don't even understand this, before going to military intelligence, which is what he was commissioned in. Each only had one car. So my husband arranged with the Southern Baptists that the men would share a car and I would share a car with the wife. So I spent 9 weeks with someone who did not know what a Jew was, who, when I read the book While 6 Million Died, her husband, who had a master's in parasitology, told her she didn't have to believe it. But she had to learn something from being with me for 9 weeks. So it's an amazing opportunity to mix with non-Jews and let them see that Jews don't have horns.
Absolutely.
I would say one of the benefits for a chaplain to have one assignment in the chaplaincy, if he or she does not decide to make it a career, is learning from each other, learning interfaith work together in a way that civilian clergy on the outside rarely do. And plus the leadership. And in the military, professional development, education is constant, and you're taught things, budgeting, leadership. I don't know how it is today, but I remember when I went in the Navy, the average seminary graduate would have 2 congregations before he or she found the one that they were going to stay in. Now, sometimes it was unusual, someone was lucky, but instead of that 1 or 2, where maybe it would be maybe be assistant rabbi, then in a tiny congregation, a rabbi, then you found something, larger. That military experience, I think, would teach you 100 things that you would not learn in those first congregations and prepare you for any synagogue in the country, I think.
Absolutely. I've always said during my during being in the National Guard, I was the state chaplain of the Mass National Guard for many, many years. When I started in the New York Guard and then went to Massachusetts. I went through 9/11. On 9/11, I oversaw the religious response for the Marathon bombing. I was a better pulpit rabbi. I was a congregational rabbi for 25 years. I was a better pulpit rabbi because I was a military chaplain, because I would learn all these skills and different things that I could take back to my congregation. And I thought I was a really good chaplain because I was a pulpit rabbi and understood those dynamics. The part I want to jump on something Arnie said, that in the religious part. The other part about being a rabbi in the military is, I think, one of the most important aspects to the greater community is Or LaGoyim, a light unto the nation. You get the opportunity to share and talk about and be that resource for people that have never met a Jew before. I used to say my last assignment when I was at National Guard Bureau, and there are people who make up in the building that were from all over the 54. And the 54, we say the states, territories of the District of Columbia. I got to meet people that I never thought I would meet. From Hawaii to, I've been to Alaska twice, never thought I'd go to Alaska. And a lot of times just sharing about Judaism. I'm sure some of them have never met a Jewish person before, but then they get to do it or to ask questions. They would pull me aside, Rabbi, I'm going to a bar mitzvah, and what's an appropriate gift to give? And I felt being there and that they feel comfortable to say this, two really serious questions. Hey, I'm really, what's going on in Israel? Can you just walk me through this? Or Lagoyim, a light unto the nation, to be able to talk about it and doing it. And I know both Arnie and I have had this for senior leaders, meaning really people above us in rank. And since both of us made it to what we would say is officer grade 6, Arnie was he was called a captain in the Navy. I was a colonel in the Army.
But it's
The same,
yes,
we're the same rank.
yes.
And so I know our influence at the general officer level, the flag level, we say, or general officer level, admirals or generals, that I think a lot of times they turn to us quietly more than maybe a Christian chaplain, because we weren't trying to convert them. We weren't checking on because most of them were not Jewish. We weren't going to question them. Did they go to church enough? Or,
Exactly.
hey, by the way, would love to see you in chapel. We weren't doing that. We were there to listen to them and to advise them, sometimes on really serious issues that they wanted to. And I had in Afghanistan, I had a general that I didn't really know him. We said hello in passing on the base, but he set a little appointment. He wanted to talk about personal issues. And I got the sense he wanted to just hear someone who could hear him. And what we bring is that, and whether it's, it might not be the deep down secret they're planning on an attack, or this is how they're having whatever it is,
Right.
but what they're looking for. And what we bring that sacred Jewish rabbinic tradition of thousands of years. I used to say one of the greatest things is Pirkei Avot, ethics of the father's teaching. And I would use that at the end of a briefing or something. And I could see the leaders would be like, yeah, I like that. That's how I want to approach the world. And that's the rabbi bringing that.
And
As
I
we
like,
come, okay, go, Arnie, go
just
ahead.
to
But I
say,
want to say,
I like to think that somewhere there's a veteran in a group, maybe a junior sailor or soldier or airman in a group of friends, and someone says something anti-Semitic, or maybe they're preparing to do something anti-Semitic, and this veteran says, wait a minute, when I was in the military, it was a rabbi who helped me. And
Yes.
it's like throwing a stone in the river and the ripples and the ripples and the ripples. Who knows what an impact we've had with all the thousands of people that we've talked to, Larry, and other chaplains.
Mm-hmm.
so as we come to a close, two things. One, Larry's going to tell you how others of us can support the Jewish Welfare Board's work with Jewish military personnel. And the other is he's going to say, but then I'm going to include in the description the URL where you can reach out and find out more if you're a rabbi who's less than 42 or more than 42 and willing to go for an exception.
We'll talk to you. Absolutely.
Yes. So, Larry, tell us about how we can help.
So, first of all, thank you for having us. And with the upcoming Veterans Day, I actually always been saying this now. If you have a relative or a friend that you know has served, call them on Monday, on Veterans Day, November 11th, and just thank them for their service. Just that little thing
Acknowledge.
really ignites the soul. Reach out to the JWB, to our parts, to talk about what does it mean to be a rabbi. I always say, ask me anything. We have, and I always put them in touch with a rabbi who's in the field, active duty, or in the reserve components, whatever service, to get a feel of it. And so we are there, and the URL is a way to reach me. And I'll also include, Phil will include my email. You can reach out to me there. But consider it. Or if you are just listening and you think your rabbi would be good, say, hey, I heard this podcast. Or just mention them in your congregations to support. And so I'll make the pitch that from a congregational point of view, thank your veterans. Think about something that you can do. Connect, and I'm going to say this from my work at the JCC Association. Think about your J's, your Jewish community centers, as a way, if you're a veteran, ask about how I can get involved and help support veterans. I know the Jewish community centers around our country are very supportive of our program, the JWB, and just Jews who have served in the military, great ways to connect, and we together can help do more. So think about what it means to serve.
And as Arnie and I were talking about before, if you live near a military base, think about when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it comes to Pesach, who can you invite? Yes, the chaplains have seders on base, for example, but there's still, a home invitation really means a lot and shows that, you're not just saying thank you with word service, you're really showing that you're thanking.
Right. And
I'd
the other,
also say
go
to
ahead.
synagogues, I'm sorry, I would also say to synagogues, invite a former or current chaplain to speak on Veterans Day, to speak on Memorial Day. I hope we've shared a few stories, even during this brief podcast, that may have information new to some of the listeners. I'm so honored when a synagogue or a church invites me to speak about what it is to be a chaplain and serve in the military.
I'm laughing because my synagogue temple, Beth Am in LA, asked Mitch and I to come talk to the seniors on Veterans Day. No one has ever asked us. So I'm piling up my souvenirs, including my re-up milk carton from 50 something years ago for show and tell. But yes, that's an excellent idea. And we can teach more people about Jews in the military.
Right.
And the need for rabbis,
Right.
Jewish chaplains. So, Arnie, do you have two more sentences you want to add? Larry, do you have two more sentences before I thank our listeners?
I would. Larry said, thank military personnel for their service. I'll tell people a secret that you might not know. It's always wonderful to thank someone for his or her service. But if you know they were in Vietnam, there's one thing to say that's even better. This is a secret code. Say welcome home. Because
Yes.
when we came home from Vietnam, we were not welcomed. And as a matter of fact, I think the proudest thing that I ever was involved with, I was one of the small group of veterans that fought to build the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in DC, and I gave the prayer at its dedication. The final thing, if I can just tell one interesting insight that I think I've learned over the years, when I first went in the military, a lot of times, I'll use a stereotype of a Jewish mother. They would say, what's a nice Jewish boy like you doing in the military? And it took me a while to connect that to my father's experience fleeing from Russia, that there was a belief that the military is inherently anti-Semitic, because the military under the Tsars, you mentioned the Tsars, actually was part of the program to eradicate the Jews. They would take Jews at 10 or 11, put them in a place far from a Jewish community, and that was one of the ways to do it. So there was a sense that we had to avoid the military. If there's a story I can share, and Larry, I'm sure would say the same thing, that's not the American military. But many of the changes have been because of the Jews who have served with courage and with honor. And I would say that includes the rabbis, but greater. So, if we want to, we should understand that it's a matter of pride. When you're serving in the military, you're touching military people who eventually become veterans, and you're touching the United States and its concept of what Judaism is and the importance of Jewish wisdom.
Absolutely. I would also say one way for people to just help support, if it's even not through the JWB, to be able to help Jews, is donations. We'll also make sure there's sites where you can reach and help, everything from different food items we send out for holidays to programming to allow Jews to be able to come and train and be with their fellow chaplains. So great ways, which is a way of helping serve. for me, and I would sometimes say, maybe it goes back to when I said, I played with GI Joes when I was a kid and played soldier. And I remember I was sitting in my little hut in my base in Kabul, Afghanistan, and I'm in my camouflage uniform, and I'm thinking I'm in this country. I'm wearing my kippah. Um, I'm in uniform. And I look down. I felt so proud to wear an American uniform as an American, as an American Jew. It said U.S. Army, but also in my uniform. And I think this is where it it really hit home with a true source of pride. I also had the Ten Commandments and the Star, the Jewish chaplain symbol that had Hebrew writing on my American uniform. And I said, this is what it means to serve our nation with pride, with kavod. Um, it's it is it has made me a better human being, not just as a rabbi. So thank you for us share our stories and to encourage others.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories, and thank my listeners. And I will say, thanks for your service to veterans. And I know exactly what Arnie was talking about. So welcome home.